Thank you so much, Anne Marie.
And you're very welcome. And we are ready to go. Just one more moment. Welcome, Cynthia. You are ready to go.
Thank you, Anne Marie, and thanks, Beth Ponder, and everybody who has done so much work to get me here today. And thanks to all of you who are attending. I'm really happy to have a chance to share this information with you. I feel like it's so important for so many reasons, and I think some of that will come out in the process of this webinar. Some of you know that I did a webinar a few weeks ago on the census in general, and I'm going to repeat a tiny little bit of that information here just to give you the context in case you missed that one, but hopefully it won't be too repetitive for people who already heard the previous webinar. The agenda today looks like this. We're going to do this welcoming housekeeping part. Remind you that this is the second of 6 webinars, so there's a bunch more coming, and I have a slide listing those out. We're going to talk about why the census matters in general. Probably a lot of you already have some ideas about that, but I'll give you some more concrete information about that. And then there's 2 things we're going to cover here. One is about applying for a census job. The census is hiring hundreds of thousands of people to do all sorts of different jobs, and our learners are potentially good candidates for some of those jobs. So I want to make sure teachers and practitioners in the field know about this option. The other possibility here, which is sort of career related as well as leadership development related, is training students to be census ambassadors. And I'll be obviously saying more about that. The idea here is it's not a paid job, it's a volunteer gig, but we know that that makes a really big difference for people's resumes when they have done something substantive as a volunteer, and this is an opportunity for them to do that. And finally, we'll have some time for questions, and I have some more resources to point you to. All along the way, I hope that you will chat me your questions or comments or hesitations about anything I'm saying. I'm going to be checking that chat box frequently. If I miss something, I know Beth is going to notice it for me and interrupt me, and I really do encourage interruptions. It's a lot to just listen to one person kind of download tons and tons of information on a webinar, so any interruption is totally fine and appreciated, and probably the question you have is the same question a lot of other people have, so don't be shy, just throw it in the chat box and we will get to it. Here is the list of the webinar we did a couple weeks ago, the current one, and then 4 that are coming. The last 2 aren't actually inked in yet. Those are tentative, but the March 3rd and April 7th ones are definite. So put those in your calendar. I think they're in the same time frame. They're the first Tuesday of the month from 3 to 4 your time. Okay, so now I'm going to just back up and give a little bit of context about the census. As all of you know, it's coming up very, very soon. In fact, it's already started in Alaska. They get going early in Alaska, enumerating the number of people who live there, because apparently people move to their spring hunting grounds at a certain point, and they want to catch them in their villages before they make that move. So the census is underway in Alaska. Apparently it involves going around by a dog sled, as well as a number of other means. And it's going to kick off in the 48 states more concretely in March. What's going to happen is people are going to start receiving postcards in the mail, and the postcard's going to include a URL, which tells you where to go to fill out the census online. And they're going to send out a total of 4 reminders by postcard. And what's going to happen if the students or if the household does not fill out the census by the time the 4th one is sent or after the 4th one is sent, then they might get a phone call or an in-person visit from a census enumerator. And that's where the jobs come in, I think. This is what's most likely for the kind of jobs for our students to get. They would be census enumerators, and that would mean calling people or going around in person to their home, knocking on their door, and using a tablet. I understand that this is going to be done on a tablet in real time. So it's kind of interesting. Hopefully it will work well. But literally the addresses that the person has might shift if, say, somebody did fill out the census online. That address would no longer need to be visited. And that would be sort of unfolding in real time. the census enumerator would, need to use a lot of digital literacy skills to kind of follow that, to go to the correct addresses, and then to use the tablet to support the person to fill out the census. That's why February is a good time for students to be applying. A lot of applications have already been submitted, but this is still a good time for students to be submitting their applications. The actual door knocking part isn't going to happen for another month or two, a couple months. So why is the census so important, and why are we making such a big deal about it in adult ed and in all of our communities? The reason why is because the census determines the resources that our state gets from the federal government, and it also determines our representation in Congress, in the House of Representatives, because as you know, that is determined by population. And Texas, I believe, has a growing population, and I believe you're due to get a couple of more representatives in Congress. And so if your count is accurate, you'll get those representatives. But if you have an undercount in Texas, you might not. And plus you would miss out on important resources. The census has created this interactive map of hard to count areas, and the darker the area, the harder to count it is. And so you can see which parts of Texas are deemed by the census as hard to count. If you click on that link, or if you go to this website, and if you just Google hard to count census areas, you'll go right to it. You can zoom in and get a lot more detail. So like if you look at Dallas, you see there's a lot of little tiny little orange spots. You could sort of zoom in on that and find the spots. And then there's other parts of Texas that are just great big swaths of areas that are hard to count. So I encourage you to look at this, zoom in on your location, and think and figure out what counties around you, what areas around you are hard to count. And these are the areas that are going to be particularly in need of perhaps bilingual enumerators. And a lot of our students might be perfectly situated to get these jobs. So an undercount would cost Texas $1,578 per person per year. So that's a lot of money. You have to multiply that by 10 because the census only happens every 10 years. You're not going to have another opportunity to count the Texas population until 2030. And if you think about a whole family might get undercounted, then you multiply it by the number of people in that family. So it's very significant to keep these numbers in mind as we share information with our students about the point of the census. I made a big effort in the last webinar to say that our job as teachers in this moment is not necessarily to persuade people to fill out this census. It's more to share information with them so that they can balance the benefit of filling out the census along with the possible risk and make a decision that they think is best for their family and their community. What do I mean when I say possible risk? Let me get to that in the next slide, because before I do get to that, I want to just share this a little bit more detail, which shows the programs that are funded by federal funds. And so in Texas, these are the top 10 programs funded by federal money. You can see that it makes a big difference to all of us. I mean, all of these things are critical for all of our communities, and especially our students who possibly are already working multiple jobs and dealing with lots of stresses. If these programs are undercut, it's going to add even more stress and make it even harder for people to participate in their education. I mentioned about risks. Indeed, a lot of our students are going to feel very leery of going online and sharing private information about their families, including how many children and what year they were born, the date they were born, whether they own their home or whether they rent. They might be homeless. They might have to reveal that. There's a total of 9 questions that the census asks, and people might be leery about answering those questions. But there is a law called Title 13 of the U.S. Code, which makes it absolutely illegal for the census to share any information at all that they get about individuals. And census takers are sworn to secrecy. So anything that a census enumerator learns about a family has to be completely confidential. And they're sworn for life, to confidentiality. Could this law be broken? Could there be a situation where the census would share the information with some other branch of government, like, God forbid, ICE or, say, some law enforcement agency or something like that? You know, the answer is no. It's supposed to be airtight. It's supposed to be strictly enforced, and civil liberties groups all across the country are mobilizing to ensure that this won't happen. However, we know in life that there are no guarantees. So it might not be our place to tell people what to do. Same as when we teach about voting. You know, we help people register to vote. We might teach them about the process and teach them about what's at stake, but we don't tell them what to do. It's the same with the census. I think we need to kind of really proactively, intentionally lay out what's at stake and then leave it to people to make up their minds about what to do. In addition to just being a tremendous learning opportunity, this whole census, it's sort of like this being delivered to us for people, for teachers, adult ed teachers are always looking for relevant, engaging, meaningful current events and authentic situations to teach basic skills in. And the census is certainly giving us that. In our upcoming webinars, I'm going to talk and share a lot of teaching materials that you can use to teach about the census. But what we're going to talk about here is this other opportunity that the census offers, and that is the opportunity to get a pretty good job. You do need to have advanced ESL skills. I went online and filled out the application for myself, and you know, it's not simple. You would need advanced skills. The pay is decent. It depends where you are in the country, but the pay is decent. It takes about 30 minutes to apply. In January, they start selecting supervisors, and then in February, they start hiring the census takers or the enumerators. And those would be the likely jobs for our students, I imagine. The hours are part-time and flexible, but obviously you want to be working this job when people are home for the most part, and that might tend to be evenings and weekends. They really need bilingual speakers. Apparently in the current pool, there are only about 20% of the applications are bilingual, and they need a lot more than that. People should, you know, even just going through this process with your students would be a great learning opportunity. Even if they didn't end up getting a job, just going through the application process would be a good opportunity. Here's a list of some of the qualifications. You have to be able to speak, read, and write English. You have to be over 18, and you have to be a citizen to apply. Now, notice there's an asterisk there. I don't know if anybody has been up to date on that, on the situation here. Apparently, the law requires that you be a U.S. citizen. But there's a loophole in the law, and that is that if they don't have enough qualified people from the pool of citizens who apply, then they can open it up to non-citizens. You do need a Social Security number. You have to be able to legally work in the U.S., but you don't have to be a citizen. So my understanding is that they're encouraging people to apply, even if you're not a citizen, so that your application would be in the pipeline. And if they needed people who, especially if you spoke a second language, if they're needing that language, then they would contact. Most of the jobs require a valid driver's license and access to a vehicle. And you also need to have a computer with internet and email so that you can do part of the training is in person and part is online. So that's a lot. That's a lot. When I think about my students, I think about this would be there's a lot of challenges here. But I think for a solid number of our students, this could be a really good opportunity. Here's a whole slide on this question of whether non-citizens can apply. I just wanted to quote this from the Census Bureau about this appropriations law. So it is true that they will hire some non-citizens. Just to give you some perspective, in 2010, they say they hired 700,000 people, and of those, only 4,000 were not citizens. So it's not a huge percentage, but it is some. And especially if you're in these hard-to-count areas where they need bilingual speakers. Okay, another big thing that our students might think about is, oh my gosh, what if I get a temporary job, will I lose some of my benefits, like my food stamps, Medicaid, or my children's health insurance? And the answer to that is no. The Census Bureau has been strongly encouraging all states it is up to the states Okay, so it's not up to the federal government. It's up to the states to decide if this income will count against these benefits. And 43 states have so far agreed that they won't, and this includes Texas. So you can safely let your students know that they'll get this temporary income and it won't affect their benefits. So I see that Nuri is saying that she's a native Spanish speaker, she has a green card, she's applied, and she hasn't been accepted. No, your application has been accepted, but no job offer yet. Yeah. What I keep hearing from the census is just hold tight, hold tight, hold tight. You might be at the bottom of the pile since you're not a citizen. They might hire any Spanish speakers who are citizens first, and if they don't have enough, then they would be able to use that loophole in the appropriations law and allow you to come in. So Nuri, you might be the last to hear if you get a job. Sorry about that. And you might not even hear for a couple more months. So
Cynthia?
Yeah.
Cynthia, this is Beth. We also have a question from Kelly Meeks.
Okay.
Will they allow a person with a 5+ year residence card?
I don't know what that is, but if you can legally work in the U.S., then you can apply. If you have it, you have to have a Social Security number. That's my understanding, is you have to have a Social Security number. And if you have that, you can apply. And like I said to Nuri, your application might be at the bottom of the pile if you're not a citizen, but they will get to it if they need you. I wanted to run through the process of applying. And I hope it doesn't seem too overwhelming. I like I said before, I do know that this would be a lot for some students. But I think that for a handful, for like a significant chunk of our students, this could be a really good match. So I want to be really realistic about what it involves. So you definitely have to apply online. You have to create an account. So you have to have a valid email address, and you have to set up a password, and that way you can come back to your application. Like I said, you need a Social Security number. You don't have to attach a resume, but you'll probably want to have a copy of your resume with you or something that shows the dates of employment of your previous jobs, because you'll need to include those. Men will need to enter their selective service number. Okay, so you know that when you men who turn 18 in this country have to register with selective service. And if they don't, that actually is a problem for them in a lot of ways, including getting student loans and things like that. So that is something to check in with all of your students about. I run into this a lot of time with my male students where they haven't done that, and they really run into problems when it comes to applying for college and trying to get loans. After you're 26, you can't even, I don't think you can register at all anymore, but if you catch them before they turn 26, you might still be able to register. After you apply, there's this waiting period. You'll get this notification that says that the status is available. If you don't, there's phone numbers there's a phone number you can call. Apparently, your application stays in the system and doesn't expire, so if you're not called for a current opening, there could be something could come up in the future. And you know, the Census Bureau doesn't just do the decennial census, it also does other things, like the American Community Survey and other types of work. So it could come up in the future that they might need to hire you. There will then, if your application goes through, there will be background check and fingerprinting. So, you know, they're going to check your background. If you'll pass that, you'll then need to be fingerprinted. Now, my understanding is that the way that they'll do the fingerprinting is you can go to an Office Depot near you. Apparently, they have some agreement with Office Depot. Do y'all have that in Texas? It's an office supply store. And apparently, there's other locations as well, but Office Depot is the main chain that they have partnered with to do the fingerprinting. There's also a way to do fingerprinting by mobile. Some mobile option for fingerprinting. I don't know what that is. I didn't get to that point in my application, so I don't know what that looks like, but that is also an option. And then if you pass all of these things, you will end up with a job. You will then get 1 to 2 weeks of paid training. And this training will be both in person and online. So you'll, like I said before, you'll need the access to a computer and an email so that you can get notifications about the training. And if you're in a field-based position where you're having to drive around to neighborhoods, you'll need a car. Most likely you'll need a car. And then you'll need supplies like flyers and pamphlets. You'll need an ID badge with your photograph on it because that's how you identify yourself to people who answer the door. And these are things that you can pick up at your area census office, or that census office could mail them to you. What type of things would disqualify someone? Oh, good question. I don't know. That's a good question. I'll look into that. Okay. So let me just hear a little bit from you now. I've been sharing a lot of information. What do you think? Does this sound like something that would dovetail at all with what you're doing in the classroom already? Are you working with people on resumes and with applying for jobs? Have you done practice interviews or anything like that? Do you work on any of these skills that are sort of related to the enumerator position, like digital literacy, perhaps customer service, being able to deal with difficult situations? Say somebody answers their door and they're angry or they don't trust you or they don't know who you are, how to de-escalate situations like that, sort of customer service type things, communication skills. Are you working on these kinds of skills already? Does this seem like a dovetail? Train is saying that they can repost or share where the lesson plans are for teaching about the census process. Yeah. I have on my last slide, I have a bunch of links to resources, so I'll definitely share those. But let me hear from other people. Can any of you chat? Are you fast typers? Can you let me know how this is hitting you? Is it sounding like too hard for your students? Sounding like maybe a job you want to go after? Something you think you might be interested in walking your students through? Everybody perhaps getting an email address, going online, setting up an account. I mean, all these things are digital literacy and kind of jobs and career skills that are transferable and important no matter what, because in this life, so many job applications are done online. So I see this, I teach a GED class and this would be great for us. Many of my students are trying to get a better job. Most work in factory settings, so this would be awesome experience to put on their resumes. The reason I asked about the background checks is because some of them are on probation for various charges. Yeah, let me look into that, or if anybody wants to look into that. I think it's a really good question. I sort of find myself doubting that misdemeanor type charges would matter, but perhaps felon offenses might matter. I just don't know. And I guess, it is worth having them explore it too, is just part of the learning process for them, because they're going to bump up against this a lot as they apply for jobs, and that is what having a record, how is it going to affect their job application. And so just having this experience of bumping up against that obstacle, figuring out whether it is an obstacle, figuring out if there's any maneuverability around it or not, is a really good learning opportunity for everybody. So what I'm saying is, like, almost rather than not do it, really explore it and find out, because there's probably a lot of gray area in there. Claire says, the only thing that I think would hold some of my students back would be having access to a computer and internet for the training and being able to use the tablet on the job. Yeah, that's a big thing. I don't know if your program would have a computer lab that they could use for that. That would be a nice offer if that was possible for them to come in and do their training at home. Maybe they could get some emails on their smartphone or something, but come into the computer lab to do the training. Or maybe they could even do the whole training on their smartphone. With the way phones are these days, that might be possible. Using the tablet on the job, also, that's a good learning curve right there. I mean, I'm assuming that would be part of the training that they would get, would be how to use the tablet. And then the way to prep them for that would be to just be trying using tablets, in the classroom, so that it doesn't feel like a foreign object. It feels slightly familiar and friendly. Thank you, Claire. And I'd love to hear from other people too, just what you're thinking about this and how it's hitting. I mentioned that I have some more resources. So this is a website that Andy Nash and I have been working on developing for the New England Literacy Resource Center. You can find it at that URL right there. And if you go to that page and scroll down about halfway, you'll see a heading called Census Jobs. And this is some videos, PDFs, links that we've vetted, and I mean, there are millions of things out there. And there's just almost so much, it's just kind of like an avalanche, and it's hard to sort through what's good, what's not so good, and what's helpful. And we have tried to vet these things and find the things that we thought were most helpful in the adult ed classroom. And we've put them here. And so you can see there's a couple of short videos that describe the work, and those are fun to watch because it shows people, walking around to doors, using tablets. It just gives a visual. So a person would have an idea of what it looks like. There's a video about how to apply for a census job. There's some videos in English and in Spanish. More detail, an FAQ about the census jobs and the application process. This slide, to make it big enough to see, it kind of runs off the right end of the slide, so you can't see the whole thing. But if you go to the URL, oh, and thank you, Beth. She put it in there in the chat box, so you can click on that. You can find a lot more material. So if you really are thinking about bringing this into the class, you can show some of these videos, or share the hiring guide with the timeline and things like that. Okay, so before I move on to this slide, I just want to back up again and just give people one more chance to let me know if you have any questions about applying for the job, whether you think your students will be interested. What languages do your students speak? What communities? Do you have pockets of communities where there's certain language that's mostly spoken? And then of course the value of having somebody whose native language is, say, Spanish or Cape Verdean Creole or Arabic, and going into a mostly Arabic-speaking community, or Vietnamese, or and talking to people who speak that language, it's going to go a long way to building trust and to helping people feel like, oh yeah, maybe I could fill out this census. I think that it really would be a good opportunity, and not just in that sense that our students would get jobs and they would have something to add to their resume, but also that we would be less undercounted than we probably are destined to be, because there's a lot of disincentives to filling out the census, including not understanding it, not understanding the questions, getting a little bit tripped up on, I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at the questions, but there's some questions that kind of trip you up and you're not really sure how to answer them. And that right there might make somebody just want to give up. That, I don't know how to answer this question about what my race or my ethnicity is. And I don't see myself listed here, and I don't know how to answer the question, so I'm just not going to. And I'm just going to skip it, or I'm just going to trash the whole thing. So having this, having our students be those enumerators could make a big difference. So let's say our students apply for these jobs, but maybe they don't all get these jobs. What's another way we could plug our students into this process that would also yield career skills for them? And I want to make the case that providing a census ambassador training to all of our students, whether they end up becoming a census ambassador or not, it doesn't matter. Even if they become a census ambassador and only talk to one person, like their brother or their uncle or their next door neighbor, that's fine. They were a census ambassador in a sense. They spread the word to somebody that they know. And even if they don't, they gain a lot of knowledge. They learn a lot about U.S. history, how the government works, how funding is distributed, how democracy is affected by something like this. They learn digital literacy skills. They get all sorts of vocabulary help. They get document literacy, the filling out forms, both online and on paper. So this census ambassador training, and you can be very forthright about this and transparent about this. I decided to take on a census ambassador training in my classroom because it's an opportunity to teach reading, writing, digital literacy, leadership, all these important things, whether you become a census ambassador or not. So I want to make the case that this is a great chance for students to try something out and even to become a leader in a way that they might not have experienced before, and also to have something for their resume because they've done a volunteer gig. Even if they've done it in a small way, they can claim it, they can own it, and they can list the skills related to it on their resume. And I did a bunch of Google searching about the importance of volunteering on your resume and what that looks like. It can really add to a resume and make a candidate look more attractive when it shows that they have this kind of engagement with their community. Okay, somebody asked, do all the questions have to be answered, and if not, do census workers come back to a household? Oh yeah, that's a good question, yeah. So all the questions are supposed to be answered by law, apparently. The law is that you have to fill out the census. It's legally required, and you have to fill it out completely. Now, what if you skip a question? Well, it's possible that that will bring more attention on you because somebody will call you or somebody will come to your house to get that question answered. Or it's possible that it will slip through the cracks. What I tell people is that it's better to fill it out because you're obeying the law, and to fill it out completely. And that by filling it out completely, you avoid somebody coming to your door, possibly. Also, there's things that are confusing, like I mentioned in the census questions, but you really can just decide whatever's best for you. I mean, it's just if you're struggling with which race to put or something like that, you just have to decide. You just pick whatever's best, and there might not be a right answer, or you might not be perfectly reflected in the list of options, but you just have to pick one. Okay, so what about this census ambassador training? I feel like there's a lot of ways to do it. One is short and sweet. I'm going to take you through that with this change agent lesson packet that I developed for exactly this purpose. So it's kind of like all done for you. It walks you through all these steps, and it provides you with all these materials, and it's kind of, a few weeks of class time, or depending on, how your classes are set up, I'll walk you through that. Another is to piggyback on another school systems trainings. So I found one in the Austin Independent School District Department, and you could click on that link and find that, or you could find another one closer to you. One way to do it is to go to your Complete Count Committee. I'll share in another slide the URL for the Complete Count Committees. These are kind of grassroots committees getting set up all over the country where people are concerned about their community being counted completely. And you could contact your Complete Count Committee and ask them if there's something you could piggyback onto. Another option is to just outsource it completely. And one organization that's doing a lot of trainings in Texas is NALEO. Do you all know this organization? It's the National Association of Latino Elected Officials. And they have this woman, Genesis Sanchez. I emailed her. She emailed me right back. She said I could share her email with you all. They are setting up trainings throughout Texas. They've already done 2. Their next one happening is in Dallas on February 22nd. And she said there's more to come, and that you should feel free to write to her to find out if there's going to be one near you. So I'm sure that would be a great opportunity for students. It would be another level of engagement with an organization. They would meet other people and kind of learn all this stuff outside of the adult education program. And then they could, I think there would be a lot of leadership that would come out of that. Maybe they could bring it back into the program and share it with their class or share it with other classes. A lot of cool stuff could happen. So those are some ideas. I mentioned about Complete Count Committees. Again, you can just Google Complete Count Committee Census, and you'll get right to this interactive map, which again, if you zoom in on it, you'll see those little pins each represent a Complete Count Committee, and it's very, very useful. It includes an email address for how to reach the person at that Complete Count Committee, and you can hook up with them and see what they're up to and see what you can join in on. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There might be stuff already going on in your community, and this is a great way to find out. Okay, so what about this ambassador training? It basically includes sort of census basics, who's counted and why we even do this thing. What about privacy? That's going to be the biggest issue people are concerned about, so we want to make sure that a census ambassador knows how to answer those questions. And they're also going to learn a lot of speaking and listening skills, how to process and retain information, how to share it, how to respond flexibly to questions and concerns, and how to play a leadership opportunity, a leadership role in their community. So here's what this lesson packet includes. Let me just run through some of these things quickly. First of all, this lead article, We Count, Count Us. It's written by this wonderful student from Washington, D.C. She says, I want to tell my immigrant people that the U.S. Census Bureau will not share your information under any circumstances. And she explains what law there is that protects the information. She explains why the census is important. And we created this little quiz so that students could maybe first test their knowledge about the census and then read the article to get the answers, because all the answers to the quiz. So using this quiz would be a really great way to sort of help students show that they got some mastery over this content. First they could try it, they might not know all the answers, but then after reading the article, they would be able to go back and correct their answers. Then we have something that I wrote, actually. I tried to write it at a very accessible level called Who Counts Everyone, and it helps people think about how to count the people in their household. So this is trickier than you might realize, because you might have children who stay in your house some of the time but not other times, or you might have a kid in college who lives at home or maybe who doesn't live at home, and how do you count all these people? So this is another piece that helps explain that at a very accessible level. And then another piece that explains about, those two main reasons why we do the census, because there's money in your state and because because of apportionment in Congress. So I rather than take you through each and every page in a great amount of detail, I just want to let you know that this is the kind of thing that you would have in this Census Ambassador training. You'd have writings by students written at accessible levels, students themselves kind of reflecting on this whole process and whether or not it's something that makes them feel, do they feel safe enough, asking that question, answering that question, and wrestling with this topic. And so a Census Ambassador would have gone through this material and wrestled with it as well and been able to develop their own responses to it and their ability to communicate about it. And as we know, the best way to learn something is to have to turn around and teach it. And so giving students the task of sharing with others what they've learned in the Census Ambassador training is a great opportunity for them to really retain the information. This is an important piece here, this one called Learning from History, is written by Andy Nash, and she points out that the census has been misused at different times in history. It turns out, especially related to wartime. So when we're at war is when we tend to play a little bit fast and loose with some of the privacy laws that we have. And this happened during World War II in a particularly egregious way. The census shared information with the military about where Japanese people or Japanese Americans lived, and they used that to round up Japanese Americans and put them in internment camps. And Andy does a really masterful job in this article of encouraging us to face this history and face this phenomenon and balance it with the potential benefits of still participating in it. This packet ends with, I'm just kind of flipping through a few more slides. Hold on one second. I see Lorraine is asking, what's the date of this issue of the Change Agent? It is March 2020. It's at the printer right now, but the census packet is available for free online right now, and you don't need any kind of online subscription or anything. It's just freely available to anybody who clicks on it. I think I shared the lesson packet URL, but if I didn't, it's probably coming up on a upcoming slide. Just to back up and say that the Census Ambassador training would conclude with students actually going out and trying it out and then reflecting on the experience. And so I have I include a template of a log that students could keep where they put the date and they mention the person that they spoke to. And they have a section where they can say what concerns were raised, what questions came up, and maybe they might need to do a little bit more research on a question that came up if they didn't have the answer. Part of the skill of being a census ambassador might be saying, "Oh, I don't know. That's something I could go find out." And that's a great skill, as a great college and career readiness skill right there. Being able to say, "I don't know," and then go find out, and then bring the information back. So the goal isn't that you are the expert. The goal is that you've wrestled with this material, you're familiar with the material, you've been able to dive into it a little bit and gain some consciousness and awareness such that you can communicate with friends and neighbors about it. And there's a lot of ways that you could act as a census ambassador depending on how much your program wants to support this kind of effort. Let's say your program was really into it and all the teachers were doing it in their classrooms, and you could set up a table somewhere, could be in your program somewhere, or it could be at a public library, it could be at a grocery store, it could be in some public place where people would stop and get information. It could be a lot less ambitious. It could just involve, just talking to people informally. But whatever it is, a student could keep a log of their experiences and have a chance to reflect on it. And I think that's a really important part of the learning process because embarrassing things happen, hard questions get asked. There's things where you wish you had a do-over, but you can't do a do-over, but next time you get out there and try, it can go differently. And that's just, there's so many great, important soft skills that you can learn by being a Census ambassador. So I really encourage people just going and downloading this packet and trying it out in the classroom. And of course, you can feel free to mix and match. Use some of the pieces, not all the pieces. There are a wide range of levels in the packet. So some levels might not be right for your students. So feel free, to ditch that one and just leave it out and focus on the levels that are right for your students. So if you did this Census Ambassador training, what do you think some of the skills your students could put on there? Say they were going to then add this to their resume, that they were a volunteer Census Ambassador in spring 2020. And you know how we often include the skills that involves or the work that they did. What are some of the things that you could put? Data entry. Yeah, exactly. That's actually, that's a really good direction. You could take this. Students could actually, part of their Census Ambassador work could be kind of taking the pulse of the community and finding out what people think about the census. Maybe share 3 things you've learned, that you've heard about the census. And that would actually uncover some rumors. It would uncover some possible questions that you could then address. Evangelina says communication skills. Mauro said interviewing skills. Lorraine says interpersonal. Evangelina, communication. Yeah. And, one way to launch people into this might be to have them practice in the classroom first. You could do some role plays where you could even get somebody to play, a particularly difficult customer, somebody who was very negative or something like that, or just very difficult in some way. And this would be fun to do. It would be fun to practice that. And there'd probably be a little bit of laughter going on, which is always a good way to loosen people up. And then what I like to do when I do role plays is after the role play is just ask for the class to give feedback. What did you think about that? What would you have done differently? What did you like about what he or she did? What would you do differently? And then, okay, now why don't you try, and get people trying it. So just want to make sure you can see okay, great. Claire says yes. Kelly says customer service. Yes, that is a tricky thing too, man. Customer service is a very nuanced skill. That is not like, can you hammer a nail? That is really tricky stuff because it's dealing with humans. And this is an incredibly rich opportunity to deal with humans. And so I think it would be a really great addition to a resume, not just the resume, but preparing even if people are thinking about going to college. So Lorraine says, does the training provide safety info, i.e. what if someone is too negative? Nope, it doesn't. It has some tips. I can't remember if the tips address that, but if that might be a good thing to just sort of generate in your classroom. If somebody's too negative, what's the point at which you just say, well, thank you so much for your time, and you just walk away, right? Because there is that point where that's just the best thing to do. Versus, oh, it seems like, this is something that's making you feel a lot of anger or stress or something. Do you want to say more about that? Like what's going on there? And try to find out. So sometimes that might be appropriate, and sometimes it really might not be appropriate. It might be best to just move on. So yeah, kind of wrestling with that would be a really good thing to try out in the class. Okay, here's a slide with resources, and you can see the National Coalition for Literacy is doing lots of work on this. NELRC, like I already mentioned, has lots of links to webinars and materials. The League of Women Voters is a great option. They have a lot of materials. Rock the Vote has a great video that is fun to watch for students and also good resources. There's also this bit.ly. See that bit.ly right there? That is a Google folder which teachers are just adding to right and left. So as teachers develop census materials, they're just throwing it in this Google folder. And it's pretty well organized. You can find a lot more materials there. And then there's this census.gov. There are frequently asked questions about the job. Those are some resources. I see it's 2 minutes to the hour, so we don't have too much time, but if there's any quick questions, I would love to hear them, or any thoughts at all. It'd be great to hear. I really appreciate everybody being here today, and I hope you've gotten some useful information about how the census, both as a potential job and as students being census ambassadors, could be a really useful way for them to add to their resume and develop their college and career readiness skills.
This is Beth. Cynthia, can you remind the participants what our topic is going to be for our March 3rd
Yes.
webinar?
Yeah.
We can run back to that slide maybe.
Yeah, I'll quickly go back to that slide. The March 3rd webinar is going to be looking at the census itself for the actual census. So the questions that they ask on the census, and it, as you know now, you can fill it out online or on paper. And so we're going to look at the forms. We're going to look at the online version. We have a practice version that you can show students online. That's going to be a really useful tool. And then also the paper copy and the vocabulary and the kind of the bigger questions that come up in the process of filling out the document itself. So that's going to be a really good teaching opportunity, and I really encourage you to come on March 3rd at 3 o'clock Central Time to a webinar that will share lots and lots of resources around the actual form and using it as a teaching tool.
And Catherine is asking if you can show the slide of the map.
The hard to count one, or this one, the hard to count. So this one, if you just search for hard to count communities census, you'll find it. And then the other map that I shared was the complete count committees. And if you search for complete count committees census, you'll also find that one. Oh, the other one she's saying, yeah, that one's the complete count committee. And that one is right down here somewhere. It's a long URL to have to type. So I encourage you to just do the Google approach. Search for it, and it comes right up. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here, and please feel free. The first slide had my email address. It's cpeters@worlded.org. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have, or if you have any comments about the webinar. I would love to hear from you, and I hope to see you on March 3rd for the next one.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. We appreciate all that you've done, and we look forward to next month.
Thanks a lot, Beth. Appreciate you.